Hello, everybody, and I am really late with my UFC 312 predictions here, Duplessis versus Strickland, because, well, it's been my birthday weekend. That's number one. Number two, not really all that excited for this card. By the standards of a pay per view, this is crap. But you know what? We're here. It's a pay per view. It's got some interesting fights, but there's a lot of like very too true outcomes or like very unproven fighters that was like, it's like, all right, if you can live up to your hype and you can be what you're supposed to be, you're probably going to win. But we've seen enough guys like not be able to do that I am apprehensive. I am nervous about the topic. And there's also, for a UFC pay per view, a lot of debuting fighters here. Talshin Teixeira is a debuting fighter. You've got Alexander Topuria. You've got Colby Thickness. You've got Cody Steele. You've got Jonathan McAuliffe. You've got, I'm pretty sure this is Quillen Kild's debut. Yeah. So we got like a half dozen debuting fighters here. Granted, some with like a lot of hype behind them. Topuria because of his name, Talshin Teixeira because heavyweight is always like very desperate for heavyweight prospects. And then Salkalid is also quite good. But like and then on top of that, you've got Rong Zhu, who's been cut before. You've got Ansel Jubilee, who, forgive me for saying this, I just don't think is UFC caliber. And then, otherwise you've got Tom Nolan, who I'm just very negative on. And like, a main card fight between Jimmy Crute and Rodolfo Bellato that makes like no sense to me from like a booking standpoint or especially a main card standpoint. I don't know what we're doing. So yeah, not happy. not super happy, but let's get into the fights here. Well, okay, actually before that, the typical disclaimer, I am going to talk about betting odds. I'm going to talk about what I'm going to be doing for betting, and I'm going to be talking about information that you can use for betting. But I have always had the point that you do not bet big money on MMA. It is far too unstable, unpredictable, reactive, explosive. What's the word I'm looking for here that describes like sodium and other alkali metals? that you just should not. Combustible. Maybe that's the one I'm looking for. It's just not the type of thing that you can ever predict with that kind of frequency. So what I do is I bet a little bit of money and I have a little betting fund that gets refreshed every month. And if it goes zero, it goes zero. And that's all there is to it. I'm not going to go put down the car on these fights. So let's bust into this, shall we? Dricus Du Plessis in the main event against Sean Strickland defending his belt. This is a rematch fight, and there's no reason to pick Strickland. Now, you may think like, oh, well, he's really certain DDP is going to win. No, I am not. The first fight was the sort of thing that like a couple little things go differently, a little bit of an adjustment by Strickland. He absolutely wins this fight. Just different judges that look at different things. You could, like, Strickland could very easily have won that fight. The reason I can't pick him is that he's a guy coming in off of a loss in a fight, coming into a fight that he's already lost. And he's a guy who has no adaptations to him for this. There's nothing he's going to do differently. He is going to fight the same fight with DDP he fought the last time, and it lost. So I'm not really sure how you can pick him. His historical adaptations are basically two things. Number one, way back in the day at 170, he would like wrestle people. That would be like his adaptation. Like, the striking's not working. I'm going to go to my BJJ. I'm going to go to my wrestling. He really can't utilize that at 185. And historically, he has not used that at 185. In fact, I'm kind of curious here. I did close UFC stats. God damn it. UFC stats, please. What is his wrestling performances even like at 185? Because I can't really think of anything. Okay, he did score a takedown against Nasruddin Imavov and Jared Cannonier, 4 against Uriah Faber in 2021, 1 against Brendan Allen in 2020. And then, yeah, we're back into the 178 is when he wrestled Court McGee and had a takedown against Alex Garcia and largely pursued a takedown heavy approach against Igor Araujo back in 2015. Like at 170, he's not, or 185, he's just not going to be able to bring that kind of wrestling game to the table. I don't even know if it would win. But like, that's the thing, is like the adaptation that he's historically had, he doesn't even really do anymore. And then the other adaptation was letting Abus Magomedov beat him senseless and gas and then beat him. And that's not going to work against DDP. Like DDP does gas and does take rounds off, but he gets a second wind and he's super durable and he's super tough and he's super physical. You're not going to be able to utilize that game plan and actually have it work. So if he's going to go in there and do the same thing that he lost doing last time, I'm not really sure how you could pick him. Again, I could see it. You just need judges with a slightly different version of how to score things. But Sean Strickland is a very predictable fighter. He fights everybody with a largely one-size-fits-all strategy, and it either wins the first time, or there's not really any reason it should win. There you go. Now, am I expecting a ton of adjustments from DDP? No, not really. But if there is somebody who's going to make them, it's him. And he could put more emphasis on the wrestling game. He could do a lot of things, honestly, to make this fight a lot better for him. Just like Strickland, honestly, could do that. Just like simply, for example, there were a couple times in the first fight where Strickland would like actually bait a pretty heavy commit from DDP on a single power strike, slip it, or otherwise defend it, not eat it, and then come forward with a 2-punch combo and really actually do some damage to DDP. The problem, he's not going to do that as like a plan. Like there's going to be that, but he doesn't have the kind of like 2-punch, I guess in this case, knockout power to realistically actually, finish DDP with that kind of tactic. And he's not going to do it enough to actually make it be like the theme of the fight. So yeah, I have to go with DDP by decision. I'm not going to be surprised if Strickland wins, but I'm just not sure how you could feel really confident about a guy who lost this fight already, has a history of not really having much in the way of adjustments, fighting again. There you go. That's all. That's all I got with that one. Anyways, betting odds on that fight are Plessis at minus 195 to minus 225. Strickland at plus 163 to plus 185. I'd say that should be a little bit wider. Like maybe like minus 230 on the low end. But I get it. Strickland's got a lot of love from the, let's just call them counterculture crew. Weili Zhang defending the strawweight title against Tatiana Suarez. My mind is arguing on this one, and I'm picking Zhang right now, but by fight time, I might swing to Suarez. And here's the basic summary. On one side of my mind, there is the part that is like, styles make fights, and athletic ability is a cheat code that can make up for a lot of deficiencies, and I should pick Suarez. Because Zhang, while being a better total package fighter, she does a lot of things way better than Suarez, does not have a game that denies the pocket, and does not have a game that denies wrestling exchanges. And Suarez is possibly the best woman in the world at that, and at the very least, the best woman in the world at that at strawweight. Like, if you give her her game, she will crush you. And Weili Zhang, I don't think has the ability to not give her that game. So what's the other side of this equation? That, like, I'm respecting that Suarez is a physical beast who has all the right tools to implement her game, and Weili Zhang doesn't have a way of denying it, is the fact that realistically we've seen Suarez in the third round 3 times. And in 2 of those, she was essentially fighting somebody who just didn't have the physicality to fight back against her. I'm thinking particularly the Carla Esparza fight. But the other time, Nina Nunes, she looked very reduced, very, very human. And that's kind of the problem, is we've really not seen her very often actually persevere through adversity in the cage. Outside the cage, a ton. She's had a boatload of medical issues, boatload of injuries, which is, by the way, another reason that I'm always very nervous picking her. I feel like every fight in the UFC she's had, there's been like something akin to Tatiana Suarez is incredibly good and should win this fight, but she's been out for a bunch of months. In fact, what is the shortest gap in her fights? Wow. Oh man, it really did kick off right away. So she beat Amanda Bobby Cooper to win TUF 23. That was in July of 2016. She did not return till November of 2017. Then 6 months later, she fought Alexa Grasso. Okay, that's decent. And then 4 months after that, she fought Carla Esparza. So we had a little bit of a run there. But then we're looking at 10 months to the fight with Nina Nunes. We're looking at the better part of 4 years before fighting Montana De La Rosa and Jessica Andrade, which was 6 months later. And now we are here again with her having not fought in 2024 at all. And it's just very, very nerve wracking. Like I feel like if we had seen a more battle tested and healthier version of Suarez, I'd be picking her without a second thought. I'd be thinking, you know what? Again, Zhang is not really going to deny the type of fight that she wants. Not really going to emphasize the range game that she has as an advantage. And will lose. But like, I just don't trust Suarez to actually win 3 rounds. And I don't trust her to finish Zhang. I wouldn't even if she didn't have the injuries and the bad performance against Nunes in the 3rd round, which by the way, I mean, she arguably still won that round. So it's not even a terrible performance, but like it's a notable drop from what she was doing to Nunes in the 1st and the 2nd round. So I'm going with Zhang by decision. But realistically speaking, there's a lot that can go wrong here. And by fight night, maybe that side of my brain that's like going, styles make fights. Don't look at the better fighter. Look at the styles. Look at the athletic profile. We'll win out and I'll pick Suarez, but we'll see. It's an even money fight, by the way. They're literally the same odds, plus 105 to minus 125 on both ends. Talashin Teixeira versus Justin Tafa. I do not have a lot to say about this fight. Teixeira is... he clearly has potential. He's tall, decently thick, appears to be the right power, athletic tools for a heavyweight. He has some good ideas. There's some shoulder roll in there. There's some defensive ideas. There's some counter-striking desires to his game, which I think are a great base to build something off of. And he's relatively calm. Even when things went wrong in the Contender Series fight, he kept fighting, relatively aware, relatively good. But the problem is he's exceptionally raw. He has fought guys with a combined 9-19 record before getting on to Contender Series. And even the guy in Contender Series, who was 6-1, one, gave him some troubles, but 2, has a very padded record himself. Like, this is a very, 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 very unproven fighter, which is unfortunately just the case with regional heavyweight MMA. If you're a reasonably good athlete, you will excel. You will look very, very good. And honestly, we're going to find out what he's really got here, I guess. And against Tafa, at least he's got a guy who's not going to be very, very varied on the matter. Tafa basically has 2 ideas, which is punch a man really hard in the head or punch a hit man really hard in the body. And I guess that's admittedly more ideas than a lot of heavyweights actually do have. So there is that. But yeah, there's not really a wrestling threat. There's not really a grappling threat. There's also, let's be clear here, Tafa is not exactly high profile in terms of who he's won. He lost to Jared Vanderaa and Carlos Felipe, which is not good. And his best wins are Austin Lane and Parker Porter, which is also not good. So I'm going to bank on potential here. I'm going to say that like Teixeira is a guy I'm keeping my eye on. Tafa really is not. Don't get me wrong. Tafa is fine for the UFC heavyweight division. He could be a bit of an action filler piece, and that's all you really need sometimes. But Teixeira may be going somewhere, like to a ranking, to a, I wouldn't even be overly shocked if in 5-6 years he's a champion. I really wouldn't. But there's a lot of unknowns. There's a lot of question marks there. There is a boatload of question marks and a boatload of rawness. But I'm going to pick him on the potential. I'm going to say TKO's Tafa. Maybe a decision is also on the cards because Tafa is pretty damn durable. I mean, he got blown up by Jorgen De Castro, but I think people do kind of forget that Jorgen De Castro is, back in the day, was actually a little bit of a prospect and actually a really good hitter. Even though his MMA career really didn't turn out into anything that we kind of wanted it to be, ended up getting cut from the UFC after, what did he do? Yeah, he lost 3 straight fights. So yeah, he came in, beat Tafa, and then lost to Greg Hardy, Carlos Felipe. Hey, 2 mentions of Carlos Felipe in one video, and then somehow got knocked out in 2021 by Jarvis Dano. Go figure. Went on a bit of a run in Eagle FC and stuff, and then lost 2 fights in the PFL and ended up in CES, and it's not good. It's not good. But we'll go with Teixeira, but really, really worried about like what he can do. He's a minus 150 to minus 160. Tafa's plus 120 to plus 135. You know what? I respect that because I was expecting him to be like minus 300 or something stupid, and he's not. So thumbs up to the gambling community for like keeping it real. Jimmy Crute versus Rodolfo Bellato is a terrible fight. It is not even just a bad fight by main pay-per-view card standards. It is a bad fight, period. Because there's no good outcome. It's just bad. You've got Jimmy Crute, who is a guy who retired. That's bad sign number 1. Has taken exceptional loads of punishment in recent fights, particularly at the hands of Alonzo Benefield. Is incredibly brutish. His stand-up for UFC standards is pretty bad for a UFC veteran who is not an exceptional athlete. Like he literally does have this type of game that like someone like a Vitor Petrino or something like that would put together. Like they have an extreme physical edge on just about anybody. And as a result, they develop this like really brutish game. And Crute doesn't have that. I will say that like he's a pretty decent grappler, and a scrambler, but he's not a potentially potent takedown guy and hasn't won a fight since 2020. Bellato is also not athletic enough for this division and probably isn't durable enough because dude got hurt by Ihor Potieria pretty badly. I'm not going to hold getting knocked out by Vitor Petrino against a guy. That is fine. But yeah, Potieria had some moments against him, and it's just not very good. It's not very good. There's a chance that Crute just runs into a brick wall here because Bellato is pretty strong, pretty big, and Bellato just crushes him. But I'll go with Crute to like at some point get a good top position and just pound away on Bellato and finish him that way. That's what I'm going with, but my God, this is bad. Bellato is minus 145 to minus 163. By the way, if you ever have Bellato at favorite odds, you have a crappy fight. And Crute plus 120 to plus 130. Jake Matthews, Francisco Prado, what is this doing on the main card? Then again, I said that about the fight before this and the fight before that, frankly. First question, why is Prado fighting at 170? He has a chronically short reach for 155. And then why is he fighting Jake Matthews? Matthews is coming off a win over someone, frankly, more proven and better than Prado. Actually, hang on a second. I might be able to answer both questions if there was there a different fight scheduled here? And the answer is no, which explains why I didn't look it up and include it in my notes. The fights that were supposed to be on this card and are not happening were Ray Cerulia versus Stuart Nickel. That's lame because I really actually would have liked that fight. Jimmy Crute versus Marcin Prachnio, which is a better fight than the Bellato option. Kamaru Usman versus Jack Della Maddalena was attached to this card, but like got fizzled out. Never actually got an announcement. Corey Haddon versus Alexander Topuria. That would have been better than what we're getting in that regard. And I was kind of looking forward to Husung Park versus Naim Jargal Tum Mendembarel. That is a complicated name for a fighter who has a lot of like prospect in him, but like a complete lack of any structure. And it worries me. How old is he again? 26? He may, I don't know, he may still turn into something. But anyways, I was looking forward to that fight and we lost that fight. So yeah. Yeah, don't get it. Matthews is a jack of all trades, master of none. He has the occasional moment of slickness on the feet where it's like, hey, his boxing is really coming together. And then later on in the fight, nope, it really isn't. It was just there for a moment and it's gone. But Prado has no range game. He has a short reach for 155, never mind 170. He's at a 3.5-inch reach disadvantage here. He short arms everything, so his reach is even shorter than it is on paper. And yeah, there's no real takedown game to him either. And Matthews is going to be a bigger guy who can get in the pocket relatively easily because, like, again, Prado has no way of denying that. And probably get the clinch with him, probably put some wrestling on him because other people have managed to do that before. Don't get me wrong, Prado's a fun fighter. Prado is a super fun fighter that I would love to see in a different fight than this. But on the main card, against Jake Matthews, I'll pass. And that's really just it. Okay. Odds. Minus 225 to minus 245 on Matthews, plus 175 to plus 200 on Prado. I've got it by decision. Matthews is not a great finisher, and Prado's at least pretty durable. Jack Jenkins versus Gabriel Santos. Yes, put this fight on the main card. Do that. This is a better fight. I have pretty high hopes for this one. Jack Jenkins has brutal low kicks. He's got a solid wrestling and scrambling game. The boxing is not too bad as well. And his lone loss in the UFC to Chepe Mariscal is really aging very, very well as Mariscal is out there doing his damn thing and actually, like, doing it, like putting it together, putting a way better run in the UFC than I actually ever expected him to do. And then Gabriel Santos is he's an overly dynamic striker because there are times when like a simple solution would suffice. And Santos is like, nah, gotta overcomplicate it. Gotta do something flashy, something stupid. And it costs him sometimes, but he does have good low kicks. He does have a good pace, and he'll throw like some fun head kicks and good variety in there. So he's dangerous. And despite not having a really good wrestling game, at least doesn't strike me as it, he is effective. He gets takedowns. So, and he loves taking the back. He loves going hyper aggressive for submissions on the ground, sometimes to his detriment. I'm expecting a banger because I assume Jenkins will have a good enough good enough wrestling game to keep his feet on the feet. Because, like I said, I don't think Santos is actually a particularly good wrestler. I just think that he gets people down because he gets people down. But then again, Herbert Burns was able to get Jack Jenkins down, and I don't know. There's always some mixed feelings about that. But otherwise, he's out wrestled everyone else he's fought, including Joel Emmers, who is actually pretty good. So there you go. And Santos, he out wrestled Yiza, and that's about it. So I'm gonna go with Jenkins by decision. I just think he's a little bit better in the end of the day. I think he's got a game that's more consistent and more suited to an attritive battle. Does that make sense? Anyways, Jenkins is the underdog at plus 165 to plus 195. I think he's actually the underdog on this card I had the most faith in. And Santos is minus 200 and minus 238. I'll be putting money on Jenkins. Slaviclas Vyacheslav Borsho versus Tom Nolan. If you have been listening to me on Tom Nolan at all, you know I don't think he's any good. You know I think he's just huge and a reasonably good athlete. That's it. That allowed him to dominate some stuff on the regional scene, but he had a competitive at times fight with Alex Reyes. That's not good. He got knocked out by Nicholas Moda, who is not having a good run in the UFC, and beating Victor Martinez is just, it means nothing. Victor Martinez is one of the worst fighters the UFC has signed in recent memory, at least in this division. So, I'm not picking him. Also, big problem here. He doesn't wrestle. And if you don't wrestle with Slava Borsho, you lose. Slaviclaus is, I'm not saying you can't outstrike him, but the people who have had any striking success against him are guys who threaten the takedown. And I guess James Lontop did land a lot of strikes against him. I guess there is that. But you got to usually mix in some stuff and some looks, and Nolan doesn't do that. I don't think just being tall and long and having a 73-inch reach is actually going to be enough to stifle Slaviclaus' weapons. And yeah, Slaviclaus, TKO. Nolan doesn't strike me as like at all durable. So there you go. Borshow is the minus 110 to minus 150 favorite. Nolan minus 102 to plus 125. Kong Wang or Wang Kong. I always forget the order in which the Chinese names are supposed to be. Sue me. Against Bruno Brazil. Similar to the matchup above it. This is a fight where you have Bruno Brazil, who is probably a better overall MMA fighter in the sense that she can actually grapple and stuff. And she's a good athlete, but she's just going to kind of play Kong Wang's game, which is a kickboxing match. She is going to stand with her. Her takedowns come off of counter wrestling almost exclusively. And she doesn't really have a way of like enforcing that kind of game on an opponent. So yeah, Kong Wang, TKO, wouldn't be surprised if it goes the distance. Kong Wang's not a dynamo finisher, but Bruno Brazil has some defensive flaws and doesn't have the greatest chin in the world. So yeah, we'll go Kong Wang. We'll go TKO. She's minus 355 to minus 450, plus 280 to plus 333. Actually, out of curiosity, is Kong Wang the biggest favorite on the card? She's the biggest favorite I've talked about so far. Is there anyone below her? Yeah. Yeah. Okay, one bigger. Alexander Topuria versus Colby Thickness. I know that's not actually how the name's pronounced, but I'm going with Thickness. Anyways, a lot of hype around Alexander Topuria, and it's all about the last name. And here's the problem. There are so many combinations of brothers in MMA where one is good and one is not good. The Diaz brothers at one point were looking like that. Actually kind of did end up being the case because by the time Nate started becoming good, Nick was kind of really in degrade. But anyways, but more appropriately, you have Cole Miller, Micah Miller. You have Joe Lozon, Dan Lozon. You have Jason Guida, Clay Guida. You have a lot. Like there are some where like the brothers are actually very much replicas of each other. The Foki brothers, for example, and the Nogueira brothers. But like you also have like Alexander Emelianenko and Fedor Emelianenko. And don't get me wrong, Alex Emelianenko had a fantastic fighting career. If we ignore everything that's happened in the last 10 years. But they also had like very, very, very different styles where they were not like, and different strengths where they were not analogous to each other at all. I do think Alexander Topuria is a Ilia Topuria project in the sense that they train with each other, they come up with ideas with each other, they watch a lot of the same videos with each other. Alexander is giving credit for helping Ilia develop his boxing, but the dude has literally just beaten cans. So actually I'm respecting the betting public that they only have him at a minus 340 to minus 385 favorite against a short notice opponent, Colby Thickness. I was expecting him to be like minus 800 or some shit. And Thickness is plus 260 to plus 295. I am picking Topuria because like he does seem like he is fairly athletic. The one guy that he lost to is actually not bad. But the guy has really not beaten anything that tells us jack at all. Like, I'm not kidding. He is a 5-1 fighter showing up in the UFC with wins over a guy 3-1, 1-9, 7-18, 1-1, and 0-3. Like we do have to temper our expectations here. But like, yeah, he does have the Ilia Topuria game. In theory. But we'll see. And then Colby Thickness is pretty solid, well-rounded guy. He is a guy who can grapple predominantly and is a bit of a can crusher himself. And that's why I'm going with Ilia's brother here, Mr. Alexander Topuria. Anyways, Topuria by decision. Let's dream. Let's assume that he is, in fact, something like his brother. Cody Steele versus Rong Zhu. Cody Steele, a recent Dana White Contender Series grad, with a deep grappling background and seemingly actually decent pop in his hands. And I'm a sucker for body work, and he will work the body, which I appreciate. Let's go. Rongju is in his second run in the UFC. He is 1-3 in the UFC. The lone win is over Brandon Jenkins. He's been finished twice. He's a pretty bad striker, at least defensively speaking. There's some offensive potency to him, but the defense is really, really lacking, and I don't think he has the durability to make up for it. So he's a strong wrestler. He's a physical presence. He can grapple in his own right, but those are not seemingly the ways to actually beat Cody Steele. So I'm going to go with Cody Steele by TKO. He's facing a guy who is going to try to grapple him and try to wrestle him. Is not necessarily great at that, and also does get stuck striking a lot while being not super durable, and while offensively potent, is defensively porous. So give me Cody Steele by TKO. He is minus 270 to minus 320. Rongju plus 215 to plus 250. I could see that being wider. Kevin Jusay versus Jonathan McAuliffe. McAuliffe is another debuting fighter on this card. There are, again, I think 6 of them on this card, if I recall my count correctly. He is an MMA native, jack of all trades, master of nudge, shade him into more of a grappler territory. Kind of like, honestly, kind of feels like a Jake Matthews a little bit, actually, with like less physical upside. I don't feel great about his striking. I don't feel great about his game at all. Like, there are some flashes there. There are some good ideas. There are some good moments. There is some dynamic striking. There's a lot of finishes. He might be good. Maybe I'm just being too hard on him, but it feels like he's just not that great of an athlete and not that great of a technician. And that's never a great place to be when you're making your UFC debut, in my opinion. So I have my problems with Kevin Jusay. He's a judo guy who's being trained by City Kickboxing to become a range kickboxer with a good jab and a relatively empty volume game. And there's some definite discomfort and there's some bad instincts in his striking when things get a little bit heated, a little bit more brawlish, firefightish. But I feel better about him than I do McAuliffe, I guess, is what it comes down to. So Jusay by decision, land more strikes, land a little bit cleaner, have a little bit more of a defensive idea. And if things start becoming wrestling, he's hard to deal with because of that judo background. He is a minus 210 to minus 250 favorite. McAuliffe plus 170 to plus 200. Quillen Salklid versus Ansel Jubilee. I'm never picking Jubilee in a UFC fight. Dude lost to a guy because Mike Breeden wouldn't fall apart and started barking like a dog at him. And that memory will haunt me forever, whatever Jubilee's name comes up. He's a solid athlete with a pretty good wrestling game on paper. But yeah, I don't think he has the ability to be anything but a front runner, and he has to bully you entirely. And Salklid, I don't know if you can bully Salklid because you maybe can, because like his one loss is, if I recall correctly, is like a round 2 rear naked choke in a fight that he does get bullied a bit, but that was his debut as a pro. So we're not going to hold it that much against him. And like I said, yeah, I'm not picking Jubilee against anybody. Salklid is a pretty venomous grappler. He's a pretty good physical presence in his own right. So he's got kind of a very similar game to Jubilee without the embarrassing moment, I guess. And also from a way more proven market. Like, I just don't think that the first kind of proper Indian fighter in the UFC is going to be successful. Historically speaking, there are very few countries, and the ones that are kind of like former Soviet republics, that come in and instantly have, success. Like if you look at like China's first forays, not very good. You look at Australia's first forays, not very good. You look at New Zealand's first forays, not very good. It's basically like Brazil, America, Canada, they had like good forays to open up with, and Russia. But like every other place that comes into the big pool of MMA, internationally speaking, usually has a teething problem because their regional scene just isn't very good. And that's what Jubilee feels like. He's a guy, an early adapter of MMA in India, who is a good athlete, who is a really solid athlete. And that got him a decent record and a shot on road to the UFC, which, to be clear, has produced very, very, very little. I was hopeful about Rinya Nakamura, and that is blown up in my face. So there you go. I'm not feeling it. So yeah, Salkalid by I'll go TKO. All right, that is the fight card. I hope you enjoy it. Sorry for getting this out so late. I will be aiming in the future for getting them out on Sundays, particularly when my new schedule at work kicks in, where I have Wednesdays off. Pardon me. I think I just said I'll have them up by Sundays. No, have them up on Wednesdays. There we go. Because that becomes my day off when we hit February 24th and my schedule changes over. So I think like 2 more cards will be a little bit awkward, but after that we'll be good. Check out the links down below for more me, basically, video gaming stuff, the Discord MLA simulator, and my social medias. Let's go. Honestly, I don't know who I'm saying let's go for. The co-main event is fire, but the main event is kind of, I'm not really here for it.